Hey, there it is. Welcome, everybody, to a brand new show on my channel. The thing is, it'll probably seem very similar to all the other shows I do, but as you see, the background's the same. But I did put together a new intro. So this is something we're calling the Saturday Conversation. I'm not going to do it every week, but it will be filling kind of that time slot of Comic Art Convo, which we're no longer doing. And nothing mysterious about it. It just schedule wise and some stuff didn't work out anymore. So anyway, I thought, well, I got this time slotted for this weekend. JC Vaughn, my good friend from, he's like VP of something or other at Gemstone Publishing, very, very big wig. And he said, hey, can I come on your show this weekend? And I already have Pete Cimetti booked for tomorrow's show, but I thought, what a great opportunity to launch a new show just for JC Vaughn. And that's exactly what I did. So let's bring him on in here and say hello to the man himself, JC Tex Vaughn. How does that make you feel? I created a whole new show just for you.
I think it's spectacular. I don't think, now I was on the 0 episode of Niall Scala and Billy Tucci's show. When you hear them refer to frozen bald guy, it's because I froze during the test. I won't say I did, but my image did.
Don't wreck this show, okay? Because I might want to do another one.
You notice this is a #1 episode, not a 0 test.
Oh, that's
episode.
true.
So,
okay, so
we've got that going through. One thing. Well, two things really. One, given my hairstyle, you can guess why I would wear a big wig. Secondly, I'm not VP anymore.
Yeah, I know you got promoted, right?
I did.
I know, and I couldn't think of what your title was. So that's why I was like,
I'm president now.
You are actually not vice president, but president.
President. Right. I was vice president of publishing at Gemstone. Now I'm president.
President of publishing. Wow.
No, not of publishing, just president of Gemstone. Period.
Oh, so just like of everything.
Yep. So
I should show you a little more respect and quit messing with you. Is probably what you're telling me right now.
That's my favorite part about this, and I'm not making super fun of anybody. Not super fun, but there are people who are reacting to me like really different, and I'm doing the same job. I'm the same guy, and it's like, oh, he's the president. I'm just like, okay.
Wow. Now you got people slide you a few 20s under the table, and hey, can you help me out?
Or just like people that I haven't heard of asking me on their podcast rather than people I know and have worked with. So it's sort of fun.
Well, when you're doling out favors, just remember I started a whole new show just for you.
Just for me. I think that's got to put you, top of the list, man.
So, well, before you contacted me a few days ago and said, hey, can I come on? I was about to email you and go, you know what? We should do a show and just talk about Golden Age comics. And
there are so many different great eras of comics that we could fill hours on each of them.
Well, I picked up a Golden Age comic at San Diego this year.
Yeah.
I got a 7.0 Famous Funnies 210 Frazetta Buck Rogers cover. I got it from our friends at Bedrock City. I actually had to make payments on it because it's so expensive.
Yeah,
and they actually brought it to me at the show. And at the show, I bought a Honda Fear number 14, which, of course, the origin of the old witch, which I know you'd appreciate.
Nice.
Because you're an EC guy.
I am.
So let me...
I may have mentioned this times because my love of the EC stuff. Mm-hmm. But Bill Gaines' daughter, Kathy, and I were at lunch one day, and I said a good friend of mine had called and knew I was going to lunch with her and said that he wanted me to ask a question about a story about her dad, Bill Gaines, whether it was true or not. And Kathy just laughed and said, it's true. What's the question? and it was that Mad Magazine, this was the reported story. Mad Magazine had one subscriber in a particular country, and the guy didn't renew. And so for his annual office retreat, he took everybody in the office to go beg the guy to renew. And I said, is that true? And she says it was Haiti.
Well, get a little beach time, right? A little sunshine.
So But so there's so many great stories like that, because the people, you know, the people who did this before us were making it up as they went along.
Yes,
And
exactly.
we've had models to follow or exploit or go different directions, but we had something to react to that was done first. And some of these guys were as much characters as they were people.
Yes. Well, that reminds me, I got a question I want to ask you. Let me address the chat super quick, and then I'll ask you my follow-up EC question. Mark Pengrin is here. Leg Kick is here because Leg Kick, of course, is almost always here. Repairman Jack is here. He says, I guess I got to ask, where's Shelly? Oh my gosh. Howdy Comics Cage. This is my show. Shelly shows up tomorrow. Okay. So just, man. Duck Bacon is here. Marcus Killigrew. Squibs. Rodney Ulibarri. I haven't seen Rodney in a while. He says, nice to have a new show. Thank you. Hopefully it won't feel like the old show. Jeff Potts says, where's Shelly? See here. Oh, this is how it is, JC. It's how
if Rosina was on my show, that's what would go on too.
Yeah, yep. They always like the women. John Smith is here. Dan the Pizza Man Genovese is here. Let's see, Murdoch. How about that? One Slick Dude. Christian Zaffo, letting everybody know he's here by simply saying, I'm here. Robert Doan is here of Doan's Pills. That's if you got your backache.
Thank you for being old enough to get that reference.
Yeah, well, he showed up in someone else's chat, and I made that same joke. I was like, wasn't there Doan Pills or something? I think it was Graybeards. And Gary Martin said, yeah, it's for back pain. And we would all know. So anyway, you guys, thanks for joining us on this inaugural.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you.
Saturday conversation show. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe. That helps me grow and provide more wonderful content like you're about to experience right here. Okay, so here, I of course am talking with JC JC Vaughn, publisher of Gemstone. Is it publishing?
Gemstone
President.
Publishing.
I'm sorry, I said president.
President, yeah.
President
Bob Overstreet is still our publisher.
That's right. Okay, so you're the president
of
Gemstone Publishing, is what I was trying to say. So belated congratulations on your promotion there. Okay, so somebody actually brought this question up, and I thought, well, that's a simple question, but it really isn't a simple question. They said, well, wait a minute. Does Gaines still own EC? What happened to EC? Because we were kind of referencing the Seduction of the Innocent stuff, and my simple answer was that Gaines just shut down all the EC comic line and just put everything into Mad Magazine. Would that be an accurate description of what happened?
That's part of the story. Now, I don't think by the time that they moved to the West Coast, I don't think Mad still showed EC Publications as their publisher, as their business entity. But for years and years and years, in the Indicia and Mad Magazine still said EC Publications. And they were just downstairs on there on Broadway. They still said EC, and they were just downstairs from DC, which is sort of funny. But the Gaines estate controls the EC titles, the EC logo, and those trademarks.
Okay, let me ask you a crazy question, since we're on the EC train right now, which is a favorite train for both you and I to travel on.
Which is a freaking great train.
Has there been any conversation or consideration of relaunching those lines? Look at that smile on his face.
Yeah,
with new material.
A long time ago, long before I was in any kind of level to be in charge of anything. I was the liaison with the estate for the PR stuff. Russ Cochran, of course, was the guy doing the books.
Yes.
And Russ never, God bless him, Russ never produced a book that wasn't worth looking at. And he quit a pretty good teaching job to go do EC reprints. before he was part of Gemstone, and did those great library sets. And then,
Right. Oh yeah, those are
the
great.
ones that we did, the EC archives, the color versions of those, which were exquisite. Uh, Honestly, I came up with a plan that was way ahead of where I was in my career about how
That's
to
usually,
do it.
don't we get our best ideas when we don't have the power to implement them, right?
Honest to goodness, I do not pat myself on the back like, oh, that's a genius idea, but this was a freaking genius idea. And I'm not going to, I'll tell you privately,
Okay.
it's not something I've given up on.
Okay.
And Kathy Gaines, Mifsud loved it at the time. But like I said, I was in a position to do it. I had a handful of creators who got wind of it, call me and threatened to kill me if they weren't involved.
Well, okay. So without discussing it in too much detail, is there anything standing in the way other than just the want to, of, relaunching those lines?
Honestly, they did some stories, and I don't really know what happened with it at Paper Cuts, because they had originally talked to Jim Shooter, and then Jim brought me in, and we beat out a couple of stories to do new ones, and I'm not quite sure what happened to trip that up. The Jim story became in one of my issues of Bedtime Stories for Impressionable Children. He had Joe James illustrated it. It was a Lizzie Borden-esque story. But no, there's, listen, you'd have to come to terms with what the marketplace is now. Is the estate going to own these stories the way they own the others? Are they going to pay royalties on it the way they still do on the others? Or will there be some kind of creator ownership model here? I don't know. So that's kind of stuff that would logistically have to be worked out with who's going to own them, how long you're going to have the license for, that kind of stuff like that. All the basic stuff, and it's nothing peculiar to the estate.
Right. I mean, it would be no different than licensing Conan or
absolutely,
else, right?
Just the same thing. Like what are your terms, and what happens after it goes away? Most licenses, you don't have any, and when you work on licensed material as a creator, matter of fact, on our license panel at San Diego, Andy Mangels pointed out that the whole idea that Boba Fett never took off his helmet was his in a comic book. He doesn't get 1 cent for that being a critical point in The Mandalorian.
Well, that the thing about that is, I actually was just talking to the Conan people in San Diego, and apparently they, as I understand it now, they basically are handling their own publishing of the Conan titles now.
They've licensed it to Titan, and they're really involved with it.
Yeah. Well, what I gathered, and I had a decent conversation, but I got to sit down and have a longer conversation with them about it. But they're handling all their own. They've assembled their own editorial staff and putting the books together, and Titan is just distributing.
Yeah, I can't say that I know the ins and outs of it. I will say the artist is channeling John Buscema in a way that I've never seen done before.
I know. I thought it was a Buscema reprint. I looked, and it was so good. I was like, wow.
And Jim Zub's story is matches caliber with the art. I sort of desperately hoped. I'm not a super Conan fan. I like Conan, and I love the best stuff. So Conan stories, I just lose interest real quick.
Yeah, but, I mean, I find Cole more interesting. King Cole, not Cole the Barbarian, but when Cole was actually king, to be more interesting, because you get this greater, what do you want to call it, dichotomy, I guess, between a guy who's a barbarian, but at the same time he is a king and he has to be responsible for his kingdom.
Yeah.
I always liked that. And then Solomon Kane, I love as well.
Oh golly, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I dig anything that's swashbuckling, I'm there.
When I got the free comic book day issue, I really sort of desperately hoped that it wasn't a one-off, just like this is going to be the great issue. And I picked up number one, their convention editions. I guess the regular edition's out in a week.
Yeah,
so.
I got their. I took them from. I go, can I have these? And they're like, well, okay, we can get some more.
and I really was blown away by it. And the last time I was this pumped about an ongoing series was probably when Daryl Gregory and Carlos Magno launched Boom's Planet of the Apes. And I wouldn't shut up about that. And I have a feeling I'm not going to shut up about this.
No, it looks really good. I mean, it looks really good. And that's something that you wouldn't necessarily expect, you know, a new company, as it were, putting together something like that. And I just opened it up and I was blown away. I go, God, this looks really good.
Yeah, and Colleen Duran's convention exclusive cover, without betraying her style, had a Windsor Smith influence, you know, sort of Red Nails era, and was really appropriate. And while Art Germ's not necessarily who I would have associated with Conan, that little foil cover was pretty freaking sweet too. So I got to say, you know, I love being excited about new comics. It's a rare thing.
Yes.
When we get out of the crowdfunding arena, there's a lot to not be excited about. But
kind of a negative spin on it. I love it. There's a lot to not be excited about.
But, you know, I love when I find something where I can go that I can get up on a soapbox about and talk and say that I have nothing to do with and just point out good comics.
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, taking this back full circle to EC and then we'll move on.
Sure.
But it seems to me that I'm sorry, what's the lady's name that's in charge of the estate?
Well, it actually her son Corey Mifsud is in charge now.
Okay.
But Kathy Gaines Mifsud.
Kathy Gaines, right. Yeah. I got to assume that they would be interested in licensing. It would just be a matter of figuring out could we make money doing this, right? I mean, that's always the bottom line.
There's a big push to be made there. And one of the things to me is, you know, they've had some great licenses for the artist editions, which, thank goodness, again, Russ Cochran, first Bill Gaines preserving them, and then Russ Cochran selling them as stories rather than as individual pages. So there's a lot of that art is in single stories, are in single collections. So the artist editions of that, one of the early artist editions they did was Wally Wood, and it was like it was like, you know, his stuff was twice up, and it was just gorgeous. They did I think it was like a WonderCon exclusive one with the cover was Wally Wood's EC era self-portrait. And I gave that to Jim Shooter as a gift one time, because Wally gave Jim his first credit in a comic book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Wally, you know, if you look, Wally Wood signed his work, right?
Yeah.
But Jim, in his early scripts, always did layouts. And so
really?
Wally Wood, who notoriously didn't like writers, gave him a credit in Captain Action #1.
How about that? Wow. That's cool. That's a cool story. Well, we'll, I don't know how the chat feels, but I'm a big EC fan, so I will hope springs eternal that maybe something will come of this at some point. And
I say hope springs infernal, but I understand what you mean.
All right. So the big main topics that we have today are Al Capone Vampire and the price guides.
Indeed.
What do you want to hit first?
Let's start with the guide, since it just came out. All
right. You sent me a file. We'll just go through these.
Sure.
And so these are basically all the covers. Well, this is last year's, isn't it? I mean, am I dreaming? Hang on a second. Well, let me show you let me show what I got here. That was last year's, wasn't it?
Nope.
Kevin Nolan?
Nope.
This is this year's?
It's this year's. We just showed it early before.
Okay, that's where I saw it before. But this is, you know, this is a riff on Avengers.
We showed it when it was being solicited.
That's right. That's right.
Because the guide we solicit a little bit early.
Mm.
You know,
this is a riff on, is this Avengers 3 riff?
Avengers 3, I always love the cover for Avengers 3. Of course, it's the last one before Cap comes back, which is to me when the Avengers really starts.
Right.
But one of the weirdest things that Kirby did on Avengers 3, and I guess nobody commented on it, was there's no Wasp.
Oh, he left her out, huh?
Yeah, and so I asked him to do that, and you know, Kevin had done a great reinterpretation, and they're not spot on recreations, so I use the word advisedly, of Marvel Feature 1, The First Defenders. And there is my editor Mark Huseman and I really love the way when he draws the Hulk and colors him himself.
Mm-hmm.
There is precisely one adjective to use, and it's incredible. And we wanted the Hero Initiative edition is, you know, it's limited to 500 hardcover copies, and I really wanted to have Kevin on a wider release because he had done such a great job with that one, and so I wanted something with the Hulk, and you know, it never hurts to have the Avengers on your cover because they, you know, good recognition. And I thought, okay, and this will get Namor in there too, and so my one thing was, yeah, change the composition how you want. Probably not a lot because it's great, but I really want the Wasp in there, and of course he nailed it. So,
well, here's the question now, because I know this has become, we've talked about this before, that it's becoming more and more problematic to get permission to use Marvel and DC or copyrighted characters in general on the covers of these books. So how many hoops did you have to jump through to be able to do that?
Not a lot for this. I've had a few things where I've hit speed bumps lately, but the Marvel, listen, when it's clear cut to them, Marvel's very gracious about this, and I don't want to leave any other impression than that. It's where sometimes where we get into some different artists and things like that, where it's more challenging. Mm-hmm. But this piece, and if people now find the art or story about a particular thing, kind of, you know, I was going to say confrontational, but that's not what I mean. But volatile.
Yes.
They'll be more hesitant, of course. But this is not the case with this, and this was a pretty easy approval.
Let me. I want to show the actual Avengers 3 cover.
Oh yeah, sure.
So it looks like Kevin basically maintained the same pose, the same. I mean, he's got
sort of widens the shot just a smidge.
Yep. And then just kind of does it the way he would do it, but he's using the same basic layout.
Yeah, and so like it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's not a spot on recreation.
Right.
Yeah, he opens it up a little bit more now when you think about it, if you look at how crowded this is, mm-hmm. you can see why Kirby didn't put the Wasp in.
Yeah,
I still think as a fan, I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, maybe right in here or something, but yeah it would be. But anyway, so there's that, and I want to go back real quick and show Kevin's again because it's so dang good. But
his line is so nice.
Yeah. So yeah, he actually sort of. Is this sacrilege to say that he might have improved it a little bit?
Now, honestly, it's funny. Now, when you get into the heyday of the FF, you know, when you got Black Panther and Silver Surfer and Galactus and all these great things showing up, I have a very different opinion. But many of Kirby's covers early mm-hmm. are just another page to him. That's my opinion. I have nothing to back that up.
I wouldn't disagree with you. There's a huge difference.
Like if you look at FF1, John Snyder III's recreation of FF1 for our cover of Overstreet number 31 is far mm-hmm. superior in its composition for one reason. you've got the Thing, you've got the Human Torch flying around, you got the Invisible Girl going invisible, and on Kirby's, Reed is like, ooh, rope.
Yeah.
There's a giant monster the size of Detroit. And he's like, ooh, rope. Yeah. And it just never made any sense. And John, of course, had Reed more integrally involved in his. And, you know, other people have done recreations that were very faithful to Kirby's. And I don't get that element of that, because it wasn't, and I say this because Kirby's storytelling was so great, that it makes no sense that the cover was that way. X-Men 1 is not a great cover.
No. Well, you know, I think you look at Kirby really started hitting his stride about 1965 consistently, whereas like everything that he did was great.
Click. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I know that, listen, there's going to be people who think I'm bashing Kirby. I'm just saying, as a fan, I can discover that there are far better covers than his Marvel keys.
Yes, absolutely.
Like for instance, Avengers 4, and again, I'm a Captain America guy, I get it. Avengers 4 is the best of the early Avengers covers.
Yes. Well, when you were talking about the cover number 1, of course, you've seen FF 126, Buscema, when Buscema recreated it.
Yeah.
And it's superior to what, you know. Yeah. I mean, they're still using Kirby's layouts. You got to give them credit for that.
Absolutely. And dude, this is when we're in this sense, we're picking on the King, saying this wasn't his best work, because inherently not everything can be your best work. Something has to be second best, third best, and not so good.
But I think in those first few years of Marvel, they were all just trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And once they got it figured out, that's when it just exploded.
Absolutely. And they were creating a language that we're still using.
Yep.
So this is not talking smack about Kirby. This is just saying,
not at all. Okay, so let's see here. Should we show Dan Lawless?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, this is a great piece right here.
Let me tell you the timing you can't pay for.
Look at that.
I have a beautiful Dan Lawless Death Dealer cover, and it comes out 2 weeks after a Frazetta painting sells for $6 million. I can't pay for that kind of timing.
No, that was great. Yeah, there was a lot of buzz. I remember that. And then Dan dropped this, and we're like, whoa, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, this is as much as I love Kevin Nolan, and I think he's great. This is my favorite cover out of this cycle.
It's a great piece, great timing. The Frank Frazetta's Death Dealer comic. I think they've gone to a 4th printing on number 1. So obviously some people are looking at it. And one slick dude, matter of fact, in the chat there just said the Death Dealer comics are by Opus are great. And they are very nicely produced. And I have a bunch of them. I'm missing a couple, I just found out. And just, very, very nice stuff. And I love to see at least some folks from a new generation being exposed to Frazetta like that. So that's...
Is Sarah behind that?
Or yeah.
Okay. So I thought Sarah Frazetta.
Yeah, and that's who I dealt. That Sarah and Joe are who I dealt with for the permissions for that.
Look at this. We're not to Al Capone yet, but I'll throw it in there in case I forget. I received my copy of Al Capone Vampire about 2 weeks ago, and it's great.
Thank you very much, Grey Wolf Graphics.
Very kind of you. Let's see here. Okay. So we got this great Dan Lawless cover, and I love the fact that he could have gone a lot of directions, but he went monochromatic in this blue, and I just think it's just really, really cool.
It just jumped. And Dan had done a cover for me on Al Capone, and I'm like, I want to work with this guy again. And matter of fact, I think it was the first time on one of your shows, in the chat, he was sort of joking, said, hey, when do I get to do an Overstreet cover?
Yeah.
And I'm just, I consider myself extremely blessed with knowing these tremendous talents. And the great thing is, when I pick a main cover, like the Avengers cover, that's going to be in the bookstores. and I have to be really, brutally like, what's going to sell the best. My job is sell this
Right.
book, so there's a next
Right.
so there's a next book, right?
Only thing that matters.
And but when I get to the second cover, or if the years we do more, I can have a little bit more of my personal feelings in there. And this is one of those where it's both my personal feelings and something that I think is going to sell. And it definitely is. My prediction is that this will sell out in 2 months.
Not to get too far inside baseball here,
Yeah.
but this kind of stuff fascinates me. So if I put you guys to sleep in the chat, please forgive me. What, not specific number wise, but percentage wise, when you pick a main cover, which say the Avengers covers was what you consider the main cover, right?
Yeah.
And then this would be the secondary one. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
Okay. So how do you determine your print runs?
Oh, that part's easy and painful at the same time. Whatever I call the main cover,
right?
Basically in terms of the direct market, I let the market set whatever's the main cover.
Okay.
Quite honestly, but we print this whatever is the main cover, air quotes, yay, is going to be the one that's in the bookstores and on Amazon and that kind of stuff like that. It's the same edition. In the past, they used to have a bookstore edition, and I just wanted to be able to move it between whichever market it's selling in. So it made no sense to do that. So, but the numbers are going to be like very disproportionate when you add in the bookstores. But you might have something that sells very close. Now, I would be willing to bet that, like, in the direct market, it'd probably be 3.5 to 4 to 1 on something like an Avengers versus a Death Dealer.
Okay.
But when you add in the book market, it gets a little more lopsided than that.
Right. So you're now when you do the book market, again, here I'm inside, I'm getting into the weeds here and I apologize, but you have to do that months in advance, don't you? More so than the comic shops.
Yeah. Well, it's a much longer lead.
Right. So you got to get that first cover out that you're planning on being your main cover real early, so you can get those numbers from the
so that they come in at the same time. Now, the one thing, and this again, we're going with super inside baseball, we always make sure the comic shops get the book first. We do. It's like a 13-day lead.
Well, so for example, if you put in the bookstore catalog, right? You put in the Avengers cover at 9 months early or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you put the one in Diamond 3 months early or whatever it is.
We do.
We're offering them all the covers.
We actually do. Normal previews would be like August for October.
Right.
When we do it, it's actually April for July. We actually do a 3-month lead once it's published. So we actually have a 4-month window with this for the guide, just because we take longer.
So do the comic shops get their choice then of which one they want to go with?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They like all of the covers are offered in the comic market.
Okay.
Only one is offered in the book market.
Gotcha. All right. So then the big question I think that everybody wants to know, especially me, is how well did this sell?
That sold for a number 2 cover. That sold really well. And the interesting thing there was the hardcover sales on that were really strong, almost the same as the soft cover, which is an odd mix.
Well, these hold together better. The one I finally figured out, it took me 20 some years of collecting to realize that the hardcovers are not that much more expensive than the paperbacks, like $5 more or something, but the spine holds together way better.
It does. We've widened the gap like a normal book. For years, it was like $5.05 difference. And finally, I started creeping it up just a little bit. For years, that was the only price increase the guide had on the cover price. The paper costs the last 2 years have made that not the case anymore. Right. But I think we've got like a $10 gap between them now, which is more appropriate, and as the prices have gone up and the binding on the hardcovers has gone up, and making sure that we hit the same on sale date, it's worked out. we do about the same number of hardcovers that we used to do. They haven't really real impact that because more people have figured out what you have said, which is they stand up better.
Yeah. This is Luffy as God says, how many copies of Planet Hulk did you sell, Lopez? It's very popular, if I remember. The interesting thing about Planet Hulk, boy, talk about taking a leap off the highway here for a minute. But I guess we're talking about numbers, so it does sort of.
Sure.
Yeah, sure, Aaron. So the numbers on Planet Hulk weren't necessarily that much better than regular Hulk, because it kind of snuck up on people. Where the big numbers were is when the trade paperbacks finally came out and the collections came out. That's where I got royalties, was on those, because those sold really, really well. But I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. Okay, so let's take a look at what is this?
We should have the big.
Well, that's not Neil Adams. Fool me. Is that Bingham? Well, I'll ask you in a second. I got the guide to collecting comics, but we got the big left.
Yep.
Okay, so let's do that.
Yeah, we'll save the guide to collecting comics here for a little bit because it's a slightly different discussion.
Okay.
Dun dun dun.
There it is.
David Michael Beck doing a mostly forgotten Golden Age hero called Blackout. And I've
totally forgotten here.
Yeah, and honestly, I know next to nothing about it, and that was the selling point. And I said, okay, he did his research, he picked the hero. I knew what he would draw like, and I said, okay, do it. Let's see it, blow me away.
One slick dude knew Blackout.
And the great thing about it was I got what was easily a finished piece in. And David calls me back. No. I got to put a bullet hole through the cape. and he added that touch in, and it's just, the guy's just super, super professional. And he's a great guy, fun to work with, and did one of my original Zombie Proof miniseries covers for me way back in the day. And I've always liked his stuff, and I think this is a magnificent cover.
It is.
And I am a little bit partial to this one because of what is on the back cover of this.
Well, should we go ahead and you included one with the back cover, but you also sent me a file of just what the cover looks like.
Yeah. Do you want to do one? You want to do both? Whatever you want to do.
Well, let's go big.
All right. Go. Well, why not? It's the big Overstreet.
This is what you guys can look forward to next year with this is the big print edition, right? For us older guys.
This is the oversized limited edition of the guide. And a Phantom Lady by Mr. Lopresti.
There it is. This is not still spiral bound, is it?
No. It's matter of fact, I've got the current one here, and I'll show you. It's big. It's thick. I'll give you a comparison.
Is that a hardcover or a paperback?
No, it's a paperback. We've experimented with a hardcover.
That'd be pretty big book.
If I do that, I'll have to keep it at like around $100, which I just can't see going too well.
Right.
But just by comparison, if you want to blow me up for just a second, let me show you.
Yeah. Hang on a second here.
So that gives you an idea of the size difference here on the book.
Yeah.
And so anyhow.
So these are you finding that there is that's the back?
That is the back cover. I have never done that before.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I feel honored.
It's not the first time I've shown next year's guide. I did it in the regular guide a couple years ago. But that was a first also. But this is the first time back cover ad showing next year's cover. What the heck?
Well,
got a great cover like that. Why not go for it, right? That's
what I say. Hang on a second here. I'm going to bring it up. Boom. There we go. So everybody can see it. So you ran that big ad on the back saying, hey, this is what you get next year.
Yep.
Now, this is just for maybe that's not the right way to put it, but I'll put it that way and you can correct me. This is just for retailers?
No,
Or
we just retailers, season collectors, experienced people with my eyes my age.
So any retailer and anybody old as us.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to find myself having to go this direction in the future, because that print is
unless we start polybagging with magnifying glasses, that's the you know.
Now, are you experiencing, I mean, I know there is for the back issues, there's a bit of a collector's market, but are you finding a collector's market for these lower print run editions, like say the big book, or maybe
that's an interesting thing. We have a number of issues, and you're aware of many of them, that have gone for high prices. Now, obviously, the 9.6 CGC certified Overstreet #1 that went for, what was it, 35,000, 45,000? I can't even remember now.
Yeah,
was really huge, and that's news, right? Mm-hmm. Most of our high end ones top out in the hundreds of dollars. Right. Part of it is that's kept low because we have anything that we advertise on the Gemstone site, gemstonepub.com, that we have inventory of is uncirculated. So the prices might go higher if we didn't have half a case of this one or half a case of that one still available at relatively low prices, $100, $150, something like that. And there's some great editions that you can still get for that. Not a #1. Right. But we did a great facsimile at #1 and it sold like crazy. That was a blast.
Well, yeah, you sent me a facsimile of that #1 and I was like,
it's not that the greatest treat for a collector? You look at it,
it is.
Oh, wish I could have bought it for that.
I know. And yeah, you're looking in there at Spider-Man #1. It's like,
top of the guide, $300, Action Comics #1. Second book, $275, Detective 27.
Oh, God. Now, granted, that was what, 70 or 71?
1970.
Yeah. I mean, $300 was a little bit more money than it is now, but I think I could have, knowing, having the hindsight, I think take a time machine, I'd go back and drop 300 and not think too much about it.
Yeah. If I had a time machine, I'd have a lot more money than 300 and I'd buy a bunch of them.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't that, people, you always think about that. If I had a time machine, what would I do? And the first thing I've always thought of as a kid is I would go back and buy old comics of all the things you could do. But that's just how sick and twisted I am, I guess.
That's the disease we carry.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, no, that looks great with the trade dress, because it's always interesting. You do the layout knowing that stuff's going to be in there, so it's off center, and you're like, look at all that dead space. But then getting to see it with the trade dress on there, it fits real nicely. So excited how that came out. So there you go. Once again, I'll be contributing one of the covers to the price guide. Very excited to do it, because that's, as you know, when I did the first one for you, which was the Old Witch one, that was like a bucket list item for me. And now I've done, opportunity, well, 3, I guess, because I did the limited edition Overstreet one that had Bob featured on it.
Yes.
So I'm in heaven.
That one's a great example. That one's selling for $100 and $125. A handful of people that have sold them.
Well, that was really limited, because that was a retailer book.
That was only, just for the Overstreet advisors, and I did give some to a couple contributors.
Right. So that was like the print run. That was like 200 and something.
225, something like that. Yeah, I think it was just 200.
Well, I'll keep mine wrapped in shrink wrap. I won't open it.
It's and boy, it was glorious. So
yeah, it was fun, because I don't know that you guys have ever done anything like that, sort of celebrating Bob, right?
I'm toying with the idea. I'm toying out with the idea of a dust jacket for that kind of thing. But I think that was a really special one that we had originally planned for number 50, which were then planned for number 51, and as San Diego and other places were closed for COVID, it kept getting pushed back. So that's why Area 52 just seems so funny to us.
Yeah, that was great fun. It was a great concept, and your guy who did the design work on that bought the cover from me.
Yeah, Mark Huseman, our editor for print, he told me that he got that, and he was really pleased. And it was, it's his idea from the beginning to do this sort of area themed one, and because Bob's a big UFO guy, so.
Well, I gave him a great deal on it because I figured it was all
He
keeping the
said
family.
so, and I thought that was both gracious and appropriate, that he was the one that got it, because it really, the idea really did come from him.
Yeah, and I was hanging on to it just in case Bob wanted it or something, but I didn't hear anything for the longest time. So when he came up and said, you know, he worked on it and did actually the initial layout for me, I was like, it's yours. You've got a file in here with the Overstreet advisors. Do you want to bring that up? Is that just in here by happenstance?
It might be in there by a mistake.
Okay.
Wow. Wonder what I was sending.
I don't know,
or
but
what I meant to type,
Do you want to take a look at this guide to collecting comics now? Or
yeah,
we
can do that. I'm also going to look in this folder and see what the heck I sent you. It's just as mystifying.
Now, last year. That's just copied over by mistake, man.
Okay. This is the Overstreet Guide to Collecting Comics. We did this.
The first one you did was last year, right?
No, that's Free Comic Book Day. The last time we did a book was 2012. It actually had 2 printings. It did well enough. And it is a basic primer on collecting, taking care of your collection, careers in comics, grading, all the bagging, boarding, all that kind of stuff like that. In this case, the update is that it is a hybrid of prose and comics storytelling version of how to do this stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, the other one you did was was it the Lost
Universes?
That's not going to be an annual thing.
It was not an annual, but the next one comes in March of 2024, volume 2.
So is that because, I mean, I'm trying to remember, is that a price guide or is it just more an information book on these?
The lasting impact of it will be as a photojournal. It is a price guide. It does have whatever, that book will carry whatever the then current prices are for those books. But the main thing is that you'll have a visual compendium of those comic lines that have come and gone and sometimes come again.
So that's why you spread it out, because there's not that much happening that you can justify doing one every year, that you're going to have that much.
No. It actually would have been 2023, except I got COVID, and there was no way to hammer out a deadline for that for me.
Okay, so you're planning on doing it every year?
Matter of fact, it was on the schedule, as was this book, for 2023. For that one, this one was 2022, but I pulled the plug on it just because of that. And that ended up being good, because this book's actually much better than it would have been last year.
Okay, so who did the cover here?
This is Butch Geis.
Okay,
doing Iron Jaw. From Atlas.
Yes, from Atlas.
And
yes,
I've always got to have my Atlas stuff in there. Billy Tucci's She, and Scott Braden and Mike Malbrough's Kent Menace, which is a new character.
Oh yeah, because Dan Lawless did some stuff.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, Dan and I did the origin story for one of his great villains, the Retro Mariner. And I was basically handled a I was handed a character design and a name. I'm like, okay, here's a story. Here's an origin story. I'd really like to, and then I went back and I'd really like it to say developed by Dan Lawless and JC Vaughn. So, and they were gracious about that. And I did keep the trademark for the Cthulhu hoop.
Wait, how do you? Well, I guess you can copyright your version of it, right? Is that how that works?
Well, no, I just say developed by, but they used an element that I came up with like 25 years ago called the Cthulhu hoop. And I wasn't giving that one away.
The Cthulhu hula hoop.
The Cthulhu hoop.
That's pretty good. Oh my goodness. Well, so you guys now you've got 3 editions.
Yeah.
Of the price guide you're putting out every year.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you've got your other books that are kind of the satellite books, like your Lost Universe or this.
Lost Universes, and then next fall we will have the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide to War Comics. And I'm hoping that that's the first of a number of specialties.
So it's going to follow the same format then, like that the Lost Universes did?
Absolutely. Everything in it will be pictured.
Wow. So we're going to get to see some of those blazing combats from Warren Magazine.
Yeah,
man. Covers.
Absolutely.
I saw somebody actually had a couple of those at San Diego. You don't see those very often.
Just all the great EC guys doing war comics. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know that stuff was great.
And Archie Goodwin writing.
Yes. Wow. No, it's kind of funny how that genre has sort of been lost, but it was a very big in the market.
The great thing is that the guys, largely the big 5 DC war collectors, but it's branched out to Sergeant Fury. People have discovered the Atlas era war comics, which are really something to behold. An issue or 2 of those are just spectacular. And if you want to get into it, Fighting Marines, Fighting Army from Charlton and even further back, there's some great stuff there. And the war collectors have really done a great job of participating with the guide in documenting that. And they've seen, of course, as they get the news out there, they've seen a corresponding growth in interest.
One of my favorite Kirby covers, and this is probably surprising, would be to many people, is the cover to Foxhole #1, where the guy he's all bandaged up and he's writing the letter home to either his wife or his mother, telling about how it's like it's a picnic out here and blah, blah, blah. And of course there's carnage and death all around him, but but it's that big shot of that guy with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, but he's all bandaged up and one eye sticking out and he's got his helmet on. I just always thought that was just a fantastic cover.
And I think that's a great example. So, but anyhow, I think it'll be a really fun book. That's announced in the current guide.
So are you, I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse here, but are you, you're planning then on doing a series of genre?
Listen, they got to make financial sense, but I want to do it. And based on the reactions to the Lost Universes book, I have to try some genre stuff, because I think that there's all sorts of stuff that deserves a spotlight. And I'm not interested in creating markets. Our job is to report what the market is, but where I can help identify something that is maybe overlooked great part of the hobby, I'm more than happy to do that. And if market forces take over after that, yay for everybody who's been collecting it already. But what I'm really trying to do is outline a roadmap for people who might want to collect it.
Right. Well, I mean, it's historical too, right? And I mean, that's kind of your guys' responsibility, really, as Overstreet Price Guide, is to keep that stuff alive and show the historical significance of certain things.
That's why when Bob sold the guide, and like I said, Bob still works on the guide every year, but when Bob sold the guide to Steve Jeppe, he was selling it to somebody who believed that.
Sorry, I took a drink of water right at the wrong time.
That's okay.
So I'm thinking horror, like TV and movie comics. I mean, those are still, from a collector's standpoint, getting, like Rawhide with the Clint Eastwood photo cover and things like that are very desirable.
Every year at San Diego, and I've done it once at Baltimore and once at New York. We do a licensed comics panel, and there are so many great licensed comics that took something that somebody was a fan of in another genre, TV. Man, I was talking to Leonard Maltin in the hallway at San Diego, and
I passed him,
and he said, "How about radio comics?" And I'm like, "Man, that's a great area right there. Comics that were inspired by radio shows."
Well, you could even go back to the Platinum Age, right? And you start looking at you know, stuff for like that they were using like Buster Brown and stuff to
Sure.
sell product with.
Sure.
And I mean, there's
Matter of fact, yeah, absolutely. There's so much stuff here that it's an endless kind of thing that you can talk about. And the great part is now we actually we've been very fortunate. Now we've got people asking to be on that panel because they've got a different perspective.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the one thing that's nice about, you know, San Diego, and I would say especially San Diego because it's such a big all-encompassing convention. But despite the fact of Hollywood and toys and all these other things that have made the San Diego not just about comics, you still have a great interest from people in the history of comic books and the good old days, if you will.
Yeah.
And going back down that, you know, we were just I was surprised you weren't on it, by the way, the Ultraverse. Oh, that's right, because you weren't going to be there.
I left Sunday. You know, I got to.
Yeah.
You know, I really hated missing that because I was fortunate enough to moderate the 25th anniversary one, and you know,
yes,
Ultraverse, particularly Tom, so influential in me getting into the business and getting access to creators to interview them and things like that. That I really hated missing that. But on the other hand, every time I leave Sunday morning, I feel so much smarter than most people.
Exactly. Well, I think it's if you have the money, you stay till Monday morning, right? So
or Tuesday.
Yeah, or I think
Monday there's still a ton of people at the airport.
Yeah, yeah. But I found it interesting that, and there's still a significant amount of interest in Ultraverse, right? And I'm sure the same thing with Valiant and some of these other things. And you just think if somehow Marvel could figure out a way to move forward with some of those titles, it would just the interest in the history of it would grow, right? Because right now it's kind of like you had those 2.5 years, whatever it was, and there was just nothing beyond that, right? So it's hard to continue to generate fan interest when you're not producing anything new.
When I did the Lost Universes book, I went to Marvel with 2 requests. We were talking about requests earlier, and they approved my new universe cover, which was Starbrand.
Okay.
And they wouldn't approve an Ultraverse cover,
which was Sludge, of course.
And I asked, and I'll bring it up again in the future because I'm not going to stop. But I got my hopes got falsely up when the Rune HeroClix sneaked out. Yeah, did you ever see that, the HeroClix figure?
No.
There's a Rune HeroClix figure.
When did this come out?
I don't know. I remember Tom Mason told me somebody owed him 65 cents royalty. But sits on my desk. I took it out of the box, threw the box away. I don't care. But I had to have it.
This was several years ago, though, right?
I don't play HeroClix, but it's Rune.
My son used to. But that had been several years ago, right? Because I don't even know if they're making those, are they?
Like maybe 4 years ago. Not super long time.
Okay. Makes you wonder.
Yeah, and like, you know, and like it's like then they're like mom about it when you talk about it, but you know,
it was either a mistake or they were trying something. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
but it was I mean, I admittedly I got like, oh, maybe there's a crack in the dam here.
So anyway, people can go to, is it just gemstone.com or is it
gemstonepub.com?
Gemstonepub.com to get anything and all things price guide.
Yes.
Overstreet and
back issues, current stuff, even some bags and boards now, because hey, if you're collecting the book, the guide, you might want some bags and boards.
That's right. Why not? Well, they need extra thick bags, specialty bags for those, right? So,
yeah. Well, yeah. You know what? That's probably a really good point. We should sell one-off bags for those.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway,
have a little Overstreet label on the bag to make it your own kind of thing. Look at that. Okay. let's move on.
All right.
To the real reason you're here. Let's be honest. We want to pump up Al Capone Vampire, and this is going to be issue number 3, correct?
Yes, it is, and it will be our first one where the story. Now my issues have all been at least 48 pages, but there's been backup stories. There's been, in one case, a full graphic novella, in the case of number 2, in there with a standard length comic story. This is 48 pages, cover to cover, Al Capone.
All right.
And so number two. As a matter of fact, I'm sending them the note tonight to pull the plug on number 2, because we hope to start number 3 next week.
Okay, so you don't have any sort of address that I looked to put as a link in the.
I don't, and truthfully, if I hated my day job, I'd be on top of all that stuff. But I love my day job.
You got a great day. You got a great.
You tell 13-year-old JC that you're gonna run the book that you grew up reading. Come on.
Exactly. It doesn't get any better than that.
Okay,
so can I just run down the line here? You've got three covers. Okay, so let's go. Let's take a look at cover A first, and you can talk about the significance of this cover design. Boom. There's cover A.
This is great. What happened is my one of my dearest friends, Eddie Bowen, first guy I tried to write a vampire story with. We actually left a party one night because we had this idea for a vampire story. Got
to get home and write it down before you forget.
Absolutely. It was one of those. And Eddie and I worked together at our college newspaper, and then at Avis Rent-A-Car, my first career. And he posted a photo with his granddaughter. And I saw the photo and I knew immediately what I was doing. 3 days later, I sent him the finished art for this. And because that's sort of dead on him in the non-Al Capone position. And now his granddaughter thinks he's a rock star because this happened. And so,
well, once like
a link,
he says, "Are you sending the link
from the list of previous issues?" We sure will be doing that. Okay. Absolutely. And matter of fact, there's a good chance that we've got a storm going on here right now. So if I lose power, that's why.
Okay. I'll carry the show if you jump out.
It'll go out either late tonight or tomorrow for the Indiegogo.
All right.
Kickstarter's in for approval, but that can take forever.
Okay. So that's cover A.
Yes.
Let's take a look at cover B.
Dun dun dun.
I know, it's all these buttons I got to push. There we go.
Cover B is the all the characters that have continued from Vampire PA, both Jocelyn and Dean and Dee Dee and Scuba Dave, along with Capone. And I think that may be the next story. It may be the actual origin story for Dean, which has only been done as a prose story so far. But that's cover B. In both cases, it is Brendan and Brian Frame, our interior artists, my longtime collaborators, and Wes Hartman doing the covers on the covers.
Wes, okay. I know Wes. Now this, you have to be an Atlas fan to get this joke. This is cover C.
This is cover C, and it is based on Frank Thorne's great cover for Fright #1 featuring Son of Dracula. And Don Guzzo, who designs all my books, we played around and came up with as close to an Atlas look as we possibly could. I'm a big Atlas fan, and Brendan and Brian, the two cover blurbs, not the logo, which was Don, or the trade dress, but the logos, the blurbs, they hand lettered based on the original book.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah. And then Hi-Fi's Brian Miller did the colors on this one. I said, do the spirit of the original book. Don't be a slave to it.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at what the original book looked like.
Oh, sure. That's great.
We shall see if he was a slave or not. So that's the original cover.
Yep.
I remember, of course, you and I are about the same age, aren't we?
Yeah.
Somewhere in the neighborhood. I remember when these came out, and I remember picking up, there was some monster book that I can't remember what it was called, but had like this sort of reptile monster hero that Rich Buckler had drawn. And because it was a monster book, it immediately became my favorite, along with the Brute and, you know, the Iron Jaw, Neil Adams covers, things like that. But I remember when these came out, and the ironic thing is, of course, you know this, but this was Martin Goodman, right? Did he not lose control of Marvel or control?
No, he had sold Marvel.
Oh, he sold it and then decided he wanted to.
Sold it to, you know, the name we all saw growing up, Cadence Industries.
Mm-hmm.
He sold it to Cadence. And as I understand it, they were supposed to keep his son Chip on board and did not. And he had kept the Atlas name when they sold. And so they started this up. Martin's grandson, Jason, is a very good friend of mine. And that's one of my, I'm a source on Atlas history for him. And he's the guy I call for when I want the inside baseball.
Well, that's so basically what you're saying is that Goodman only did this because they screwed over his son.
I don't know that it's only, but that's got to be, you know, that there's got to be something to that.
Right. Because it's interesting to me. That's what I could never figure out was he sells Marvel, but then he turns around and starts publishing again. You're kind of like, well, what did you sell Marvel for then?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And he was, at least there for a short period of time, must have been paying pretty good because he had Chaykin was working for him. He had the Neil Adams covers.
He got a bunch of guys and a bunch of then newbies. Howard wasn't that established yet because we're only talking like 74, 75.
That's true.
But he was paying competitive rates. There was a book called Wreckage, WRECAGE, that was Ditko that never got published. And they had all sorts of stuff. And they had Jeff Roven, who had a really good editorial plan for what to do. You had, the two great issues of The Scorpion by Chaykin, which are just phenomenal. And
did he write those too?
He wrote and illustrated. And what's really great about number 2 is you can see pages that are clearly his studio mates helping out, which was Simonson and Bernie Wrightson.
Yeah, well, that's pretty good help.
Yeah, and it's great help when you can get it, right?
Yeah,
and it's all sorts of great stuff with that. Early Larry Hama on Wolf the Barbarian.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you have like Thrilling Adventure Stories, which to my mind, Thrilling Adventure Stories number 2 is the single greatest black and white comic magazine ever produced. Simonson and Goodwin, Giant Samurai versus Giant Spider, immediately post Manhunter, so they're just in a freaking groove.
Yeah.
The low point is totally serviceable. It's Jack Sparling, Toth, Severin, Russ Heath. Have I thought about this too much? Yes.
Okay. So I was walking by Albert Moy's booth in San Diego, and they had a painting, Neil Adams painting, and I did not recognize what it was from. So I wasn't sure if it was unused or not. I looked it up when I got home, and it was the cover to the first issue of what's it called? You just mentioned it.
Thrilling Adventure Stories?
Yes.
Wow.
That was the cover. And I'm like, now I'm thinking about getting it. And now you're telling me all these guys are on the inside of it. I'm like, I'm definitely getting it.
It's a great comic magazine.
So that was basically his Savage Tales.
It was along those lines. Now there's a thing they gave up on in the first issue, and it was a real mistake. And the legend is, and this is not something I've asked Jeff Roven or Jason Goodman about, but supposedly Martin Goodman didn't like that they were doing Lawrence of Arabia, but Frank Thorne was adapting Lawrence of Arabia in the first issue.
Are you kidding me?
And they bailed on it, which is just a freaking shame.
Wow. That would have been really cool. Now, JC, there's 2 other covers. Are we showing those?
Yeah, let's do that. I want to talk about this because this is an area with bound to create some confusion. And
so I can show this one I've got down here in the okay. Let's go. We'll start with that.
We'll start with that
because I have to dig up the other one while you're talking about this.
Okay.
So there you go. That's Chaikin. Speak of the devil.
That is that. I mean, talk about a dream thing for me, man. I had Howard do a cover for the price guide for number 48. I had him do an American flag, and it was, it was freaking American flag on my cover, and it was really great. So I met up with him and sort of reintroduced myself at Baltimore last year, and I think maybe Tom Mason might have interceded too. Told him I was an okay guy, and because he did that before I did the guide cover, and I told him I'd like to have him do a cover. He liked, I think he liked it when I said Al Capone Vampire, because a lot of people do react very well to that. And I said, I'd basically like you to do Shadow number 1 as a springboard. I'm not looking to ape it or anything else like that. But, and obviously I'd want to replace the mini Uzis with the Tommy gun. And I'd like to see his fangs. That was the description I gave him. And I got this piece fully colored. I didn't even see a sketch. And I just sat there going, when I opened it. And so this version is what's going to show up in the comic shops in October. I will have a slightly different version for our backers. The difference with this is it is just the lead story. It's none of the backup stuff. I'm trying to make my statement about how important the backers are to us being able to do this at all. And I want them to get more out of this. Listen, I want to share this story as wide as possible. Why would I not, right?
Right.
But I also want to do something that people who have taken care of me. And so what we're doing with this for this version is there will be a limited edition signed there'll be of 100 total copies. And they will be signed by Brendan and Brian Frame, who are the interior artists. Be signed by me, and they'll be signed by Howard.
How about that? Wow.
And
that's nice.
And it will actually say limited signed edition. It will not have the cover price on there. And it is, and people can choose to buy it or not buy it. It will not interfere with them buying Al Capone number 3, which again will be 48 pages. But this will just be the regular 32-page comic, and it won't have the backup stories or bonus material that were in the crowdfunded edition of number 1.
Excellent. That's a great idea.
And then we're also offering the Punch Comics. Can you hear that thunder that's going on?
Yeah, I did hear it.
The great homage to Punch Comics number 12 that Brendan and Brian did, and Brian Miller colored for number 1 for the crowdfunded edition will be the variant. We're always going to have an homage variant for this 4-issue miniseries. But I guess the great part about this is, for everybody that's doing crowdfunded, it's only a 3-issue miniseries. So when we serialize it, issue 3 will be issues 3 and 4 in the comic shops. So the backers are already going to be done with this. And I think it's going to, listen, I have no idea whether this strategy works or not. I've always wanted to go to the comic shops with this. I don't think I've ever had a title as commercial as this one that I was the creator of. So, that's that. And like I said, I never want to do anything to irritate either group, certainly not deliberately. And I want to take care of the comic shops too. I think we've got a great product. So,
well, I mean, if you want to get the wider viewership, in the way that the market is set up presently, you have to go through comic shops to get that bigger viewership. It always comes down to, and this is what a lot of us have been discussing with our projects, is, should we break these up and distribute them? I know Billy's been talking to Jeppy about that
Yeah.
to a certain degree, and it's like, is there going to be enough orders to justify?
Yeah, that's the question.
That's the difficult thing, right?
That's absolutely, that is a pivotal question. One of the things for Billy, and I'm not saying anything I haven't said to him. Billy's Achilles heel was always timeliness. You know, people like his stuff. It's very accessible. It gets new readers. All those favorable kind of statements. If Billy takes that approach and says, "Okay, I'm going to have a year. I'm going to serialize 9 issues," because that's the material he has out of the first three, right? There's 9 issues worth of material there. And he might have to do a new cover, and he might have to do a to be continued page.
Right.
Because most of them, there's some fairly natural breaks in, but every once in a while, there's one where he would need a cliffhanger page.
Right.
And I think if you take timeliness out of the equation, I think he'd kick ass with that. But who knows in the present market?
Right.
I could be totally wrong.
Yeah. It's still a bit of a crapshoot, that's for sure. And I think all of us are a little nervous about going, well, do I want to put all this into something that's not going to show me any return?
Yeah.
But if it did, you're opening these characters and your line of books or whatever to just a wide audience, and that's ultimately we all would like.
Sure.
We
don't do these so as few people as possible see them.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So I'm not clear on this, but I'm going to say there may or may not be something that I'm involved with. Are we showing that yet, or not?
Okay. Al Capone #1 comic shop version is right now in previews.
Okay.
And so they can order that, meaning next month at this very same time, and we were certainly going to announce this right now, will be #2.
Shall I show the art?
Which sort of follows in comic book terms.
Yes, 2 usually follows 1. Now, can I share the art? I don't have it mocked up, but I've got the art. I don't think you sent me a mock-up.
I did.
Are you sure?
I sent you. Oh wait, did I not send the raw image?
I don't think. No, you didn't send me any image.
Oh, I did. It was in the same folder with these 2. It should have been. I swear. Let me check.
I've got trading cards in here, and then I've got 3 covers is all.
Hang on a second.
So I have my file, but I don't have anything with the trade dress.
Hang on. I know we have this. Where did it go?
Indeed. Where did
all right. In the one that says comic shop editions.
I got it. Okay. You don't have to tell me 3 times. I can figure this out. Okay, so let's show this. This is something that by way of introduction for myself, is just something I've had to sit on for a couple of months. And I was like, I really liked how this turned out. I want to show this. And you're just like, no, gotta wait.
No, not yet.
Wait. All right, so here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, my contribution.
A big debut.
The Al Capone Vampire. There it is.
#2.
Got the babe in the red
comic shop version main cover for #2.
Right. So this is only available in comic shops, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Now we will do some kind of campaign, and maybe we should do a signed version of this one too. That because I don't want to do anything that the backers can't get.
Right.
So we will find a way to do some edition of this for the backers as well. I'm really excited about it. I sent you a couple of references or something and said, I just want a 1970s vibe. And you gave me a 1970s vibe with modern coloring, and it's just gorgeous.
What was the, this was based on something, wasn't it?
My Dracula cover was a Dracula cover, but it was not dead on.
Right. Because you said just kind of capture the spirit of it without.
Yeah, it was much more interesting than the spirit of it than the detail of it. I think it's just great.
Well, I mean, thank you very much.
Come on, look at that. How can you not want that cover?
That's exactly right. Run out and get it. It's that red dress, man. That's what does it.
It does. And his accenting handkerchief and tie.
That's right.
And hatband.
Exactly. He's there. Well, I
Probably the
figured
Hackman that does it.
the way I pictured the story here was, or at least the story for this cover image is, he's got his gun maul there with him. So, she's going to, but maybe he's getting hungry. It's time to put the bite on her. She knows too much. Maybe she pissed him off, in front of some friends at a club, and she's going to get it now. But they're an item. And so they had to match when they went out, right? With the red tie and and her red dress. And so
don't forget the hat band.
That's right. So, but anyway, no, this was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you allowing me to participate in this. Little did I know that Chaikin would be doing one as well. So I'm in good company.
Listen, man, I was very concerned about having a super strong follow-up to having a Chaikin cover. I don't want a letdown. And so that's why I came to you.
Well, I'm your guy then. Thank you though. I appreciate, thank you for having that sort of confidence in me to do this. And I really enjoyed it.
I wanted, the other thing is I didn't want anything that was going to be similar to his, except in caliber. It was really important to me that we're not just doing the same, one big pose of Capone kind of thing like that every time.
Well, and I think that's an important thing. And I've tried to get this across to other people doing, whenever you're doing multiple covers for anything, especially a crowdfunded book or something on a smaller scale, is you want every one of your covers, even if you have the same artist, like in my case, I will do multiple covers and then I'll hire one out.
Yeah.
But even the ones I'm doing the same, they've got to be drastically different.
Yeah.
It can't be just a different version of the same thing. Because then essentially what you're doing is offering people 3 cover choices that are basically the same.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's no incentive there to say, oh, I've got, I got to get all 3 of these, right? Or I want to get these 2 or whatever, because they're all the same.
And there's also a thing when you give 2 people a choice, one of the choices you're always giving them, you have to understand, one of the choices you're always giving them is none.
Exactly.
And so if you look like you're strip mining, comic fans, we love what we love, but we also know when we're being taken advantage of.
Yes. And that's the thing with the multiple covers, at least, and I'm sure you're the same way, is that I'm not saying, oh yeah, this is a limited cover, or this is, you could have, when I did the Keown cover on the first campaign, of course, the Bisley cover on the campaign that's currently running with Wraith of God, it's like, you don't have to order like 3 books to get the Bisley cover. If you want the Bisley cover, you just order the Bisley cover.
Yeah.
So you have the option of getting all of them if you're into that, or just picking out your favorite. But I think it's kind of fun to offer people options in that regard, so then they can go, and like I said, a lot of my orders are people just doing single orders, but boy, that Tomb of Dracula cover is very popular, but the Bisley cover, some people get that. Some people get the wraparound. I mean,
there's 2 things I set out to do, which is one, first and foremost, I want to offer some choices, anything to get people to read my book.
Right.
And secondly, I'd like to make the choices so tough that they do want all 3.
Right.
But, and I did on this one, number 2, we've got 2 other covers in there, which are both from the crowdfunded campaigns. They're just not newsstand, comic shop versions of that. And it's because I'm good. Like each issue of this series, we're going to have an homage cover. And the Untouchable cover A from number 2 was the Untouchables 1 sheet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I so love that cover. I couldn't not do that. But my buddy James Nelms did the sort of the Angel of Death Capone cover that was cover B. And I just got down to it. And I worked with James from my first comic strip in college newspaper. So we've been collaborating on and off for a very long time, like 103 years. And it really,
like it sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah. And he's such an outstanding artist that I sort of had to do that. I got a call from American Mythology. You only had 2 covers for number 1. How come you have 3 for number 2? And I go, because I'm weak. I can't not do this. But that's actually why I only have 3 in the campaign for number 3 this time. There will be both for Indiegogo and for Kickstarter. There will be an exclusive mini print for each that'll be exclusive. And by exclusive, I mean anybody that backs one will get both of them, but I didn't say that out loud. Because I just don't like picking between people.
I know. The lighting, NPC Oasis says the lighting and shadows are really cool. It's a really deep picture. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
It's really cool. And one of the things I asked for was the ambiance, and you freaking nailed that.
Well, I didn't want to do a cover where you just sort of had an image, kind of a vignette little image. I was kind of thinking about, well, how am I going to do the background? Am I going to fade it? And then it just became it became more of an illustration than just like a cover,
well, listen, if you're
image.
Aaron, if you're a writer, and I've heard that I am one, but if you are, and you look at this piece and you didn't have a story, you'd have one immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, man, it's really like that. So
and that was kind of the fun of it. It was be able to bring something to it. You left it open enough for me to, and so I appreciate that a lot.
Which itself is part of a 1970s vibe where the cover can't look alien to the story that's inside, but it may not be necessarily a dead-on story element that's inside.
Gil Kane was quite the master of that, kind of giving you something that was sort of similar to what was going on inside, but not exactly.
Yeah, it was a sales job. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely the case. Hey, can we show the trading cards?
Yeah, I was going to grab those just 1 second here.
Yeah,
Marcus Killigrew says I usually like the cover by the creator, and that it's interesting that ends up being true. I found that on my campaigns where the Keown cover, you'd think everybody would jump on that, or the Bisley cover, and they have, but the numbers are much greater on my wraparound cover than they are on my guest artist covers. And I think there is sort of that kind of loyalty to the creator. It's kind of like, hey, this is Aaron's book. I want to get Aaron's cover.
Brendan and Brian, and that's another reason why I have the other covers on the comic shop versions, is because they've done the work, and I think that's a big part of it. I love the idea of other people playing with my creations, and it somehow, Spider-Man wasn't always Ditko.
Wasn't
That's
for me.
Yeah.
All right, let me get the. There they are. Okay, so we'll go through. We'll just go in order as you gave them to me. These are are these stretch goal trading cards?
These are stretch goals, and I had John Brolia, who is Billy Tucci's partner on Zombie Sama, do up 3 of them. Renfield, which I believe the back of this trading card is the first time you ever actually see her name other than Renfield. And they're colored by Mort Todd, and I'm real happy with all of them. And these are going to be really reasonable stretch goals, like very attainable, because I really want to do these cards.
I was going to say how I've really got sort of I don't know what I want to say here, that just the nostalgia of trading cards, that I'm sort of really into, like creating an entire set.
Yep.
Of like 20 some cards, and my focus has gone almost entirely for stretch goals to trading cards, so I can do the entire set of cards.
I know exactly what you mean, and it's a weird thing, but right now this will be cards 4, 5, and 6 for what I've done so far, and I'm already thinking of what it looks like when I have 9. So it can be in a sleeve, and I can turn the page, and okay, then there'll be the next 9. And I really want to do that. And we actually already did a creator card for me. And so I want to get the rest of the team in there too, seated throughout that. And that is something I picked up from the original Milestone trading card set. So, which had some great ones.
Well, I remember that kind of trading card boom we had about the same time as the comic book boom was going on there in the late 80s, early 90s. And everybody was doing a card set. You had Plug did his monster card set. They did a Bernie Wrightson card set. I don't think there might've been some new material in that, but there was also, Bill Stout did one, just as far as artists. But then of course you had the Ultraverse line had their own card set, and Image was doing cards, and everybody was doing cards, right? And you had these notebooks with the little pages in them, and you just get all the cards in there. And I maybe it's just nostalgia again, but I really got a kick out of that. And I even remember gum cards when I was a kid.
Sure.
And I wasn't a big sports card guy as much as I was a. Do you remember those Universal Monster cards that had like the joke word balloons on them? And those, what were the really sort of they were pre-Garbage Pail Kids, but they were like
wacky packages.
Yes. Those with that horrible hard stick of gum in there.
Yeah, that was the Topps baseball card gum. Leftover from the war.
Yeah. That's probably true. But I used to get those. We would just toss the gum, right? But we were just getting those packs, especially of the monster cards and stuff, and those creature cards, because that had the art on them, right?
Sure. And of course, that's where First Place Mars Attacks appeared too.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, there's all sorts of great stuff. I found myself, at a time where I decided I was going to break into comics. I was super intrigued with the Milestone set, Scuba Dave, man. I just love the colors on this. And
it's very, it's kind of almost throwback, right? Kind of when you're doing flat color, and they would
John's style lends itself to a number of different approaches. There's some obvious comparisons, or maybe comparisons are right wrong. Yeah, no, comparisons that you can make to Mike Oeming at different stages. And I like both the hard fought simplicity, because simple is never easy.
No, never as easy as it looks. That's for sure.
And that's when it's done right. And I really like that. It looks a little more like Connery than my friend Kevin, which is who he's based on. But it's pretty great.
So with these three, and these are your three stretch goals, how many cards do you have in your set so far?
These will be cards 4, 5, and 6. If the campaign were to go crazy, I would come up with at least 2 more really quickly. I'd love to get a third one. I know what card number 9 is. I just haven't had it drawn yet.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I was just like, okay, I got these cards in there, and now what am I going to do on the next campaign? I mean, I'm literally thinking about my card set.
Isn't it funny how once you get that little infection, it sort of takes over in your head?
Yeah, it does. And that's kind of the fun thing about being able to do all this stuff yourself. And the only person that's approving your ideas is you and the buyers, right? If they either like it or reject it.
And as I frequently say, I'm the saddest thing of all, a comic book writer. I would love to be able to draw this stuff, but I'm generally paid not to draw.
They pay you
by society. But this is where I know I keep saying this word blessed, but I can't look at it any other way. That I know so many. I mean, come on, okay, you're me. You're sitting here, you're writing this stuff, and you can call Aaron Lopresti and say, "Hey, Aaron, will you do a cover?"
Yeah,
and that's pretty freaking great, man. Again, if you don't enjoy the parts of life where your 13-year-old self would have desperately wanted to believe you, but maybe wouldn't.
Right.
Now, you know what the truth is? I would have believed me at 13. At 16, I would have been more skeptical.
Right. I had the experience of not only once but twice staying at Walter and Wheezy's Simonson's house, right, where I was, going to New York, and it's like you sit there and go, I'm sitting here in Simonson's house. We're sitting here. He's got stacks of Thor pages and FF, and we're going through all this stuff in the middle of the night. And it's just like, this doesn't really happen, does it? And here it was happening,
18-year-old me sitting down with Walter Simonson, who was in town for Lone Star for the X-Men Teen Titans signing with Terry and Chris. And Louise was there. And he sat there and listened to me talk about what I wanted to do. I kid you not, with bedtime stories for impressionable children, which I would not do for 20 more years. But you know what he showed me? He showed me the ad that said, "What have they done to the mighty Thor?" It was the first appearance of Beta Ray Bill in that ad a month before it ran. And I still have my Star Slammers graphic novel that he signed that day.
Wait a minute. So
And,
are you saying when you talked to him, Beta Rebel had not come out yet?
Oh no, it had not come out
so
yet.
You got the preview. Oh wow.
I got the month before the ad ran, which was the month before the book ran.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So then you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, what is
I'm
this?
like, what the heck is this guy?
And he's like, you're just gonna have to wait and see, kid.
Yep.
And of course, the fact that he teased it.
Of course, Thor 337, you just get, you know, he stands everything on his head. It's got that great John Workman lettering.
Yeah.
And it's just an ending of the issue that you couldn't believe.
Yeah, that was talk about one of the greatest endings of a cliffhanger at a comic.
And the comics at its best, man. You want the next issue right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it, man. The good old days. No, that is interesting because or I shouldn't say interesting. It is interesting, but it's just amazing to us to have the opportunities, having grown up fans of comics, to, you know, it's like I said, I was getting to do the Price Guide comic book cover, you know, and getting to know you and being friends with you, and then being friends with like say Walter, or, you know, getting to meet Bernie Wrightson, which I did 5 times, even though he never remembered me. It was still an incredible moment to be out at dinner at a convention with, you know, your idol, and you're just like,
there was this time that, you know, there's this time I'm standing there with Jim Shooter talking to Stan.
Jeez.
And
enough said, right?
We were surrounded by people sitting, waiting to get into a roast for Stan. It was at what became Wizard World. I think it was still Chicago Comic Con, or it might have been the first Wizard World. I can't remember Chicago. But I'm standing there, and they're talking and including me in the conversation. And now Jim has always remembered who I was. I don't think Stan would have remembered for anything.
No.
But it doesn't matter, does it?
No.
And I'm part of the conversation. The funniest part was Chris Claremont comes up. They talked to him for a second, but then they turned back to me. And I'm like, how is this happening?
Yeah. It's like, why are you guys looking at me? What do I
talk to Jim periodically, and, you know, we've been friends for a long time, but he'll still do things like we were at lunch a few years ago, and I said something about how I had really worked for literally 15 years to get a Joe Shuster, unpublished Joe Shuster cover on the Price Guide. And there was a period where things hadn't been resolved with the estates, so DC was not likely to approve it. But when they were, I jumped back on it, got it approved, and had a great Joe Shuster cover on Overstreet number 45. I mentioned this to Jim, and he goes, yeah, Jerry Siegel used to hang out in my office. I'm like, shut up.
I know.
I'm not trying to name drop. You crush me.
Oh, I know. Well, I had a moment. It was early 90s. I think I was doing What The for Marvel, right? So I was just barely even registering as a professional. And I was hanging around with, somehow I'd hooked up with Den Bouvet, who is the artist who did the second Aliens miniseries for Dark Horse. He did the airbrush art.
Yeah.
And Ken, I hate it when I do this, because these people are friends of mine, and their name zips the pressure of being live, and their name
zips. Pressure of being live and let's say over 50.
Yeah, Ken Stacy somehow. Yeah, the over 50 probably is part of it too. But so I was there with Den Bouvet and Ken Stacy, and I don't remember how Ken was always super nice, even to, you know, people that had accomplished nothing. He was just he's always been a real nice guy. And so we were sitting there at this party in San Diego, at after party, but one of the ones that is open to everybody. You know, back when, you know, you might see Dave Stevens over in the crowd, or before everything got so privatized.
Sure.
But so we're sitting there talking, and I think it was Ken Stacy goes, "Oh, hey, there's Frank. Let's go over there." There's Frank Miller standing by himself, and so the three of us walk over there. And I guess, you know, Ken obviously knew Frank, and this was right in the middle of his, you know, heyday. They were just doing the Legends stuff, I think, through Dark Horse. So it was early 90s.
Yeah.
And so there I am, you know, they introduced me, shake his hand. He was very nice. You know, I just sat there. I had nothing to offer that these guys were talking about, but they included me in the conversation. And I was just standing there going, I'm talking to Frank Miller. I am talking to Frank Miller.
The first time I met Frank was Daredevil 168. He was at Lone Star for a signing, and he was like, "Oh, you have all of them," and I'm like, "It's like only 10," you know. But he was really cool. And my buddy Weldon, who now works at Heritage Auctions as a cataloger, had Frank draw Wolverine, and he had to give him reference because he had never drawn Wolverine before. And for years, this was our cautionary tale of he didn't have Frank date it. He has this sketch that was Frank Miller's first Wolverine.
But he can't prove it because there's no date on it.
A couple years ago, Frank authenticated it.
Oh, did he? Wow.
Yeah.
So this predates the Wolverine miniseries.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. How about that?
And so I've always thought that was like one of my favorite store signing sketches, same as a convention sketch, of course. Stories. They always get them dated.
Yeah. Let's see here. Paul Taylor, our resident biologist, says, I was so used to having awesome comics growing up, I took it for granted too. So many great stories and artists, unreal compared to now. Yeah, it is. I don't know how much of it is nostalgia, or how much of it is actual truth, but I think a lot of it is truth that comics were better back then.
We have to admit that nostalgia can cloud our judgment on this.
Yes.
But
exactly.
If you look at the different eras, there's great stuff produced under Stan. There's great stuff produced under Roy. There's great stuff produced under Jim. And I know I've very clearly said Jim's my friend, so I totally profess my bias here. That said, John Byrne, Fantastic Four, Byrne and Claremont, X-Men, New Mutants, Claremont and Sienkiewicz, New Mutants. You look at Cochran, Claremont and Cochran, X-Men, and Simonson, Thor. And one of my all-time favorite Jim stories, he says he's on the phone and Walter sticks his head in the office, says, I'm turning Thor into a frog, and then ducks out. And because of Walter, you go, oh, okay.
Well, the amazing thing is he did it. That's a great storyline, right? It wasn't just, he really pulled that off, and who would have thought, right?
Yeah, no.
But you could argue the 80s might have been the best decade in comics.
Honestly, I think there is a great thing to say that anything the great that came the next 2 decades owes a tremendous amount to that era of creativity.
Yes.
I don't want to say it's the best ever because that's for other people to decide, but it is undeniably, and listen, there's some great stuff in every era.
Yes.
And I'm not slating anybody who has a favorite comic right now to say that there was a preponderance of great stuff in that era.
Yes. I think that's the way to put it, because I grew up in the 70s. By the time 80s rolled around and I was in college, so I was still keeping an eye on what was going on, but I wasn't as into it as I was when I was a kid in the 70s. And I look back at I have fond memories of a lot of stuff from the 70s. But I can objectively stand back and go, just the amount of the quality of stuff that was coming out in the 80s from, Frank Miller was Daredevil, and then, of course, the Dark Knight, obviously. Yeah. Simonson's Thor, the stuff that anything Byrne was doing. He owned that decade. Let's be honest. And George Perez, if you're a DC guy, which I never really was, but what he was doing with Teen Titans and all that kind of stuff.
What he and Marv did on Teen Titans. I mentioned that I worked at Lone Star. Lone Star at that point, very much a Marvel store. And we were selling, at our store, I don't know about the rest of the chain, but our store, we were selling as many new Teen Titans as we sold X-Men.
Well, the new Teen Titans were kind of DC's X-Men.
They were.
You think?
Well, that's why the crossover made so much sense.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I just, I mean, I have artistically, I kind of look back on the 70s because of Wrightson and Barry Smith and Neil Adams and, Starlin, of course. I look at it, even Frazetta at that point wasn't in comics, but he was doing portfolios and stuff that were in the comic market. And I just look at that as sort of like this Renaissance period of art. But for just comic reading and comic enjoyment and the characters and things that were going on, it's really, for my mind, it's hard to surpass the 80s.
Yeah, I know we've been on a long time, and we could go about another 6 hours on this topic. But I do want to say one of the fundamental changes that happened in that area, and this is really be a great show for us to have a discussion with a number of writers and artists, is those first 10 issues of Frank on Daredevil, where Frank is sort of, Roger McKenzie's writing it, and then Frank's writing it. Within the handful of issues there, the disappearing thought balloons, where you now had to see what was going on. And I mean, there might be a rare thought balloon, but they were ubiquitous, and then they weren't. And this is a fundamental change in storytelling that is often overlooked.
Yeah,
that Miller Jansen run of Devil. Listen, I love Miller Mazzucchelli Daredevil. I mean, come on, I love that. But that Miller Jansen stuff, and there's such a stunning in the fact you can't tell segue between Frank doing the art and Klaus doing the art. Frank was doing breakdowns. By the end, Frank is doing those on typing paper. It's just, Klaus is a great artist, but Frank has really, dramatic storytelling sense, right? But the line between the two of them was gone. I saw stuff that I thought was definitely Jansen inking Miller, and it was really lightboxing story doing all the art.
Well, yeah, he really did. Jansen really did help define.
Oh my gosh,
Frank's look.
And what's really great about it is, given his stint also as colorist, he has way more tenure on Daredevil than almost anybody.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because he was working on it before Miller was even there.
Yeah.
Jansen was on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting you say about the captions, and then we'll wrap this up. But the captions, or pardon me, the thought balloons, Miller really eradicated them from the language of comics. And to me, once I saw that and saw, wait a minute, you start thinking like, you shouldn't be inside a character's head. You should be able to, because I always treated them kind of like movies. Like whenever someone did voiceover in a movie, I always felt it was cheesy. There's a one scene in Duel,
with the sole exception of detective fiction.
Okay, right, exactly. But that's narration to me. That's the difference between putting somebody's thoughts in a thought balloon or putting someone's thoughts in a caption.
One of the things I always loved about Magnum is his observations were almost wrong in the next scene. And to me, that's part of the story.
But again, I always treated those like narration. The one thing that I thought it didn't work, you've seen Duel, right? The Spielberg film. Okay. There's that scene where Dennis Weaver goes into the diner and he's looking around and he thinks that whoever's chasing him might be someone in the diner. And we're hearing his thoughts in his head.
Yeah.
And it totally, for me, that scene, it doesn't ruin the movie, but it ruins that scene because it's like.
Absolutely is the only thing in that picture that reminds you that you're watching a movie.
Yes.
And particularly can you consider where that was in Spielberg's career to like hit that kind of home run first time out.
Yeah.
Is just an amazing thing. And yet that is the only thing in there. And you understand why they did it. It was just, the temptation of it. And it would have been a really long scene without it.
But you could have done it with just how he looked at people, and you could have created some.
You also could have had conversation, him and the waitress, all this kind of stuff like that. You could have done that. But that's a great example, man. I hadn't thought about that in that way, but sure, Aaron, absolutely.
But I've adopted this Frank Miller language when I do my writing now. Is I don't do word balloons anymore, or pardon me, thought balloons anymore. But I use them as captions, and to me,
it's a big,
Feels more natural.
it's a big difference. And I think this would, like I said, I think this would be a great, okay. I do have to answer. Daniel Russell has a great question here.
There it is. So when and how do I give JC my money for?
All right. I will launch both campaigns as soon as the Kickstarter is approved. I think that will be Tuesday, but it might be Wednesday. I will have that, and it'll definitely be on my social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram.
All righty.
And thank you for asking that, Daniel.
Yeah, and that's a good note to help us wrap this up. We've been about 2 hours. I didn't know how long this would go. And
well, you know that it involves talking comics, and usually the goal is get me to shut up.
Well, no, I'm the same way. I can sit here and talk comics all day, but I actually got to draw something tonight too. So, okay, so basically what you're telling us is that we don't have a link yet, but you're going to have something next week, and you're going to make everybody aware of it on social media. I will do my best to retweet that stuff and talk about it on my shows as well, to let people know that that's happening. I also want to give there is a link. I think I put one in here, a link in the description of this video for Wraith of God Blood Hunters, which is still active. I've got 6 pages to go, and I'm done drawing it.
Man, I was just looking at the first one again. I just can't wait for this one.
Thank you very much. Hopefully I won't disappoint.
I suspect you will not.
The pressure is on, but
yeah,
I feel really good about
it. As well, it should be on us when we do these things.
Right. And we want to make sure that we're giving you guys the best that we can. And I feel good about it.
This is as much as I lament the comic market right now, the storytelling in it. There's still some incredibly cool stuff. And man, with many of these crowdfunded books, yours, I won't say mine, but I hope mine, Billy's, Graham's, so many of these things, man, we're in a mini golden age of creativity in different genres and different approaches. And some of it is all the bells and whistles, because when you're Ethan, you get like $1 gazillion coming in. And when you're with me, the decimal point is several places to the left. But it's okay. Everybody's really putting some effort into this stuff. And some of it's real stripped down. Some of it is all the bells and whistles, but all of it is somebody trying something.
Right. And that's the thing that we didn't have. I'm going off on another tangent here. I'm trying to wrap this up, but
Austin tangents. Who knew?
The thing that we didn't have available to us back when it was just pretty much the big two, is you had to convince them that somehow whatever you were pushing on them was going to make money, or they wouldn't do it, and they were risk adverse. And we are now in a position where we can try different genres and stuff that never would have got through at Marvel or DC, but now we have an opportunity to do them, and we're finding that there actually is a market, for a very diverse subject matter.
We were talking about that thing you just said, and I look back at when that first year and a half, 2 years of First Comics. A few months later, similar period at Eclipse. A few months later, similar period at Kamiko, where you just had to get everything they were doing, and they were completely unrelated, but the only unifying thing was the quality and the inventiveness. Right. I mean, there's nobody our age that is a serious comic book creator that was not influenced by American Flag, whether they admit it or not. It was just there. When Howard and also Frank went to that relaying the news media, that element of bringing the news media into our stories, it was revolutionary. And of course, I go back to Flag because, they're replacing the actor with computer generated stuff. That would never happen. Oh wait.
That's right.
Howard, people
Howard's a prophet.
Crazy for it, right?
Yeah, amazing. So maybe this to me, this is what we're calling, I guess, the Iron Age, right? But it's like, to me, this kind of feels like the black and white boom of the late 80s, or maybe the new color boom in the early 80s, which you were just talking about.
Literally, I think that's the better analogy. The black and white boom, let's face it, that was a lot of that was follow on to Turtles.
Yes.
And even, adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters by Don Chin,
Yes.
which is a very kind send up, but that sort of took on its own life, right? But that the whole boom was driven a bit by that. Danky Frankie, pick up the trades for the first two American flag stuff that they did. They cleaned up and reprinted. Dynamite and Image teamed up on that, and it's just, some of it's dated because it refers to the Soviet Union and stuff like that. It won't even matter to your enjoyment.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff that we talk about kind of in retrospect here is available in trades for you guys that are like hearing about it for the first time. Go to Amazon, type that stuff in and see what pops up, because there are a lot of this stuff has been collected, and it's really good. And you can go back and kind of check out an era of comics that you guys are quite frankly, we're too young to experience, at least firsthand. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
Now, if we can just get a sludge trade.
That's right. Well, it's funny, as I said on the panel at the Ultraverse panel, somebody asked the question, if you could reboot or any Ultraverse title, what would it be? And Tom Mason was sitting next to me and graciously said Sludge. And I happen to have a Garbage Man T-shirt on it, and I go, well, lo and behold, I said, I'm already doing it. Had a small smattering of applause, so at least 5 people in the crowd knew what Garbage Man was. But that's essentially what I am doing. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, it's your own take, and
yep. It's funny. I had different vision than Steve Gerber did for the book, and as I was joking with one of the guys that was in the audience afterwards in the panel, I said, if you read the books I wrote, they were all monster stories. You read the books that Gerber wrote, they were all crime stories. So it's like,
I got to say this as a fan. None of them were alien to each other. None of the issues of Sludge read like stuck out like a sore thumb, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, thank you, because at least on my issues, I tried to incorporate that crime element in the background, but it was only there for a few pages, so we didn't lose track of where we were at. And
then that was it, though.
Right.
It's that step of taking that little extra care that mattered. Okay, we're really digressing again.
We just started a whole new show. Let me say this, Tex, thank you so much for joining me. It was great fun as always. I could talk comics with you forever, and we'll do it again real soon. But I want everybody to please be aware that we've got Al Capone Vampire coming out, number 3, coming out next week sometime, and
Tuesday or Wednesday.
I'll make sure we're all aware of when those dates are, and we'll do my best to make you guys aware of it as well. And this has been the inaugural episode of the Saturday Conversation. I'm not going to do it every week, but I will be doing it on occasional Saturdays. So keep your eyes open for that. And tune in tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific time for Aaron Live, where Shelley and I will be welcoming Pete Samedi to talk about alternate comics and get a little bit into the weeds on smaller publishing that some stuff he's experienced. So
authority, man, that'll be a great show. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it because I want to pick his brain. So anyway, everybody, thank you in the chat for joining us. Please hit the like and subscribe on the way out. We couldn't do shows if you guys weren't here to watch it and participate with us, so we greatly appreciate it. Back the campaigns if you can, and we'll see you next time right here on the Saturday Conversation.